One of the ways to improve cognitive function is to make sure that there's appropriate amounts of lymphatic clearance. The brain has its own lymphatic system. This lymphatic clearance happens during sleep. One way to enhance it is to have the feet slightly elevated, 10 to 15 degrees. I put a pillow under my ankles when I sleep at night. Usually in the middle of the night, I realize I kicked it away or something like that. But feet elevated naps of about 10 to 15 degrees are very useful. It increases the lymphatic clearance. There's beautiful data to support lymphatic clearance as an important process. There are great data from the Nobel Prize winning neuroscientist Eric Kandel's lab at Columbia showing that when we do certain forms of exercise, there's a hormone-like molecule that's released into the bloodstream called osteocalcin. Osteocalcin is known to provide support to neurons in a brain area called the hippocampus, which is involved in learning and memory. The 150 to 180 minutes of zone 2 cardio per week will support overall brain health and function by way of improving blood flow. So a lot of cognitive dysfunction is over time and age-related dementia is just poor perfusion of the brain. This is why people who have general cardiovascular issues also generally have issues with thinking, quite honestly. Sleep apnea is also a major problem. Fix sleep apnea by taping your mouth shut and becoming a nose breather at night. That's the best way. People, again, the excess weight issue is not just fat weight, it also is muscle weight. So this is also why bodybuilders are always dropping dead. A lot of them are just asphyxiating themselves in sleep, which is terrible, but that's a niche population. But for most people, not sleeping on your back and not carrying too much weight in the neck and in the torso is going to be helpful. Now, in terms of brain function, a couple of things I just want to mention before I forget. Exercise during the day increases the rates of lymphatic clearance at night. So the reason I mention this is that these are indirect effects on lymphatic clearance and blood flow. Now, what about direct effects? The direct effects bring us to osteocalcin. And the direct effects of exercise on brain function and health actually come from stimulation of the skeleton and load-bearing exercise. And this is something that I think is underappreciated. When we do cardiovascular work, again, you support blood flow, lymphatic clearance, but osteocalcin is made by the bones. Wow, hormone that's made by bones that's released into the bloodstream and then goes to the brain and improves brain function. And how does this work? Well, when the skeleton has load-bearing, then osteocalcin is released, and it makes perfect sense. Why would the brain continue to support its own function if the body isn't being used? Well, you could say, how does the brain know that the body is being used? The body knows that the brain knows that the body is being used for load-bearing work because osteocalcin is that signal. Again, the brain and body have to communicate. And it's not like the body says, oh, I weight trained today, or I did calisthenics today. No, it doesn't work that way. There's a hormone signal to communicate that to the brain. So this can be achieved a number of different ways. I actually think body weight exercises can be quite good. There are a couple of online sources that, I think the incredible work that Ido Portal is doing, IDO Portal, he's big on this movement. He calls it movement culture, but he's a phenom, but not just doing push-ups and burpees and not that sort of thing, which are very linear, but a lot of dynamic, non-linear movement. He talks about explosiveness, suppleness, but in basic form, people doing push-ups, sit-ups, pull-ups, dips, jump squats, basic load-bearing behaviors. It's actually well established that cognitive function in aging can be assessed indirectly by grip strength. Now, why would that be? You have lower motor neurons, which are neurons in your spinal cord that control contraction of the muscles by releasing neurotransmitter onto those muscles. But you have upper motor neurons, which control deliberate motor action. And grip strength is something that really involves those upper motor neurons. And you actually can do this as a test that if you're lifting weights, if you grip really strong, let's say you're even doing a unilateral movement, if you clench the opposite fist really, really hard, you'll find that you can move more weight for more repetitions because you're engaging the entire upper motor neuron to lower motor neuron system. So there's a chain of neural events there. So the idea is that people should be doing 3 to 4 days a week minimum, but when you say minimum, there isn't much more room for upper limit, but 3 to 4 days a week of some sort of load-bearing exercise. That could be weight training to machines or free weights, but it could also, again, be push-ups, pull-ups, dips, jump squats. The ability to jump and grip strength are highly correlated with cognitive function later in age. Why would that be? Again, it's these hormonal signals sent from the body to the brain. Now, will doing a bunch of load-bearing exercise make you smarter? Probably not. In fact, we probably both know examples of people that do a lot of exercise but aren't thought of as the swiftest folks cognitively. You obviously still have to learn stuff. We talked about how to learn better. But when you do this 3 or 4 days a week of resistance exercise, you are providing a signal from the body to the brain to not just maintain, but to build your cognitive capacity. And I think that the overwhelming amount of evidence has been placed on cardiovascular exercise and improvements in the brain, even so much so that people have focused on, there's some mouse data, studies published on mice showing that cardiovascular exercise can increase the number of neurons in the hippocampus. Turns out that's true for mice, but not for humans. I wouldn't focus so much on adding new neurons to the brain. It's more about getting the ones that you have to already be more functional. And I think that one of the reasons why so much of the work was done on cardiovascular exercise is it's very easy to make mice run on a wheel. They love to run on a wheel. Harder to get them to lift weights. If you want mice to do load-bearing exercise, they actually do these kind of cruel experiments where they actually make a limb deficient so that I have to hobble around on another limb to overload that limb. Nowadays, the techniques have gotten better to do sorts of these studies on humans. And just one more incentive for doing load-bearing exercise. There's a beautiful paper published this last year showing that when people do resistance exercise, a little what's called a microRNA, which are little tiny RNAs, as the name suggests, actually are released in little vesicles, little bubbles from the muscle and travel to the body fat and help facilitate burning of body fat. So resistance exercise has obviously effects on caloric burn that can indirectly support fat loss in states of, subcaloric intake, but resistance exercise itself facilitates lipolysis, the usage of body fat for energy. So many reasons to both do cardiovascular work, 150 to 180 minutes a week minimum, and to do 3 to 4 days a week of resistance exercise. And it doesn't have to be excruciatingly hard or heavy. It does have to be effort, but it pays off through this osteocalcin system.